In remarks made earlier today, President Trump, when pressed directly about the intelligence basis for ongoing military operations against Iran, stated that Jared Kushner, his son-in-law and former senior White House advisor, serves as a primary source of insight into Iranian intentions. Not the CIA, not the NSA, not the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. A family member with extensive business relationships across the Middle East. The statement was not made in passing. Trump was asked specifically about the professional intelligence assessments underpinning decisions that could determine whether the United States enters a major Middle East war. His answer emphasized that Kushner's personal connections with regional leaders provide insights into Iranian thinking that professional agencies miss, because they are, in Trump's framing, too bureaucratic and lack Kushner's regional understanding. The revelation demands serious analysis, not as partisan criticism, but because it raises structural questions about how intelligence is being processed at the highest levels of government during a crisis that carries genuine escalatory risk, how professional intelligence is supposed to work, and why it exists. The American intelligence community employs approximately 100,000 people across 17 agencies. Its raison d'etre is specifically to address the problem Trump appears to be bypassing: the fact that personal relationships, business interests, and national loyalties create systematic distortions in how information about adversaries is gathered, filtered, and presented. Understanding Iranian intentions requires signals intelligence intercepting communications between Iranian leadership and military commanders. Human intelligence from sources operating inside Iranian government and security services, satellite reconnaissance tracking physical preparations and force movements, and professional analysis integrating these streams into coherent assessments stripped of the informant's own agenda. Kushner has none of these capabilities. What he has are relationships with Saudi, Emirati, and Israeli officials, governments that have their own clear strategic interests in how the United States perceives Iran and their own reasons to present Iranian behavior in ways that advance those interests. This is not a theoretical concern. Saudi Arabia and the UAE view Iran as their primary regional rival. Israel views Iranian nuclear development and regional influence as an existential threat. Each of these governments has long advocated for American military action against Iranian capabilities. Their concerns are real and grounded in genuine security threats. They are also partial views shaped by specific national interests that do not automatically align with American interests, which is precisely why professional intelligence analysis exists to integrate partner perspectives with independent American collection, rather than relying on partner inputs directly. The intelligence community's response. The reaction from intelligence professionals was swift and, by Washington standards, unusually public. Former CIA directors and current officials, speaking anonymously to The Washington Post and Politico, expressed alarm at the idea that personal relationships are superseding professional intelligence gathering in presidential decision-making on matters of war and peace. One former CIA director stated in a television interview that intelligence agencies exist precisely because personal connections and business relationships create conflicts of interest and incomplete pictures. Professional analysis, the argument goes, is designed to serve national interests rather than the interests of whoever happens to have the president's ear. Congressional intelligence committees from both parties responded with rare bipartisan alignment. The Senate Intelligence Committee's ranking members issued a joint statement, unusual in the current political environment, emphasizing that critical national security decisions must be grounded in professional intelligence community assessments rather than personal relationships or business connections that create conflicts of interest. The House Intelligence Committee announced emergency briefings with agency heads to assess how presidential decision-making is incorporating or bypassing professional intelligence products. The conflict of interest. Question: The business dimension adds a layer of complexity that critics argue cannot be ignored. The Kushner Company's real estate firm has sought investment from Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds. Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund committed $2 billion to a Kushner-affiliated investment vehicle after he left government service, a financial relationship that critics argue creates at minimum the appearance that Kushner's regional assessments may be influenced by economic interests rather than purely strategic analysis. Defenders of Kushner's role counter that his business relationships grant him access to senior regional leaders and informal conversations that intelligence officers working through official channels cannot easily obtain, and that the 2020 Abraham Accords, which normalized relations between Israel and several Gulf states and which Kushner architected, demonstrate that his regional access can produce genuine strategic results. Both arguments contain merit. The question is not whether Kushner has regional access. He clearly does. The question is whether that access, filtered through financial relationships with governments that have specific interests in American military posture toward Iran, constitutes an appropriate primary source for presidential decision-making about military operations. The institutional tension and its limits. There is a constitutional reality that critics of Trump's approach must acknowledge. The president has legal authority to make national security decisions based on whatever information sources he chooses to trust. Intelligence agencies cannot compel the president to read their assessments or weight them above other inputs. Congress can investigate, hold hearings, and restrict funding for specific operations, but it cannot legislate which advisor the president listens to most closely. This creates an impossible situation for intelligence agencies themselves. If they provide assessments that contradict information Kushner is conveying to Trump, they risk being dismissed as bureaucratic obstacles. If they adjust assessments to align with presidential preferences, they are failing their institutional mission to provide independent analysis. Either path erodes credibility and effectiveness. The Five Eyes intelligence sharing arrangement, the signals intelligence partnership between the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, adds an international dimension. British and Australian intelligence officials expressed private concerns to counterparts, reported by the Financial Times, about whether shared intelligence is being used to inform professional assessments or being supplemented and potentially overridden by personal relationships operating outside institutional constraints. Intelligence sharing arrangements depend on confidence that partner nations are using shared information through professional processes bound by institutional accountability. 3 scenarios for how this resolves. Scenario 1. Professional intelligence agencies find institutional mechanisms to ensure their assessments reach presidential decision-making despite Trump's stated preference for Kushner's inputs. The intelligence community works around the problem. Operations proceed. Whether outcomes validate or undermine Kushner's assessments becomes clear in retrospect. Scenario 2. The gap between intelligence community assessments and Kushner's inputs widens as operations escalate, forcing Trump to choose explicitly between professional intelligence and family members' analysis. That choice, made publicly, either reaffirms the intelligence community's role or fundamentally restructures how presidential decision-making incorporates professional analysis. Scenario 3. Operations proceed based primarily on Kushner's assessments of Iranian intentions. If those operations achieve their strategic objectives, Kushner's influence is validated, and the precedent that personal relationships can substitute for institutional intelligence is embedded in how future administrations approach similar decisions. If they produce strategic failure, the decision to bypass professional intelligence becomes central to post-mortem analysis of how a consequential war was entered based on inappropriate information sources. The deeper question: Intelligence communities exist as institutions specifically because personal relationships, business interests, and national loyalties create exactly the kinds of biases and conflicts that professional analysis is designed to counteract. The history of intelligence failures, from the failure to anticipate the 1973 Arab-Israeli War to the flawed assessments preceding the 2003 Iraq invasion, demonstrates that even professional agencies with vast resources get consequential judgments wrong. Bypassing those agencies entirely in favor of a family member's business relationships does not solve the problem of intelligence failure. It removes the institutional safeguards designed to reduce it. The operations against Iran are proceeding. Iranian responses will follow based on their own calculations of American intentions and resolve. The consequences will be felt across the Middle East and in every economy dependent on Persian Gulf energy flows. And the decisions driving those consequences are reportedly being shaped in significant part by assessments from someone whose qualifications are familial access and business relationships, rather than professional intelligence training, institutional accountability, or the legal obligations that govern how intelligence officers handle information about foreign governments. The remarks were made. The concerns are documented across party lines. The operations continue. What remains to be seen is whether personal access to regional leaders produces better strategic outcomes than the institutional processes that American democracy built specifically to answer that question.